So good afternoon, everyone. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. Always thrilled to greet the midday with the kind of guests that we have each and every day on business as usual. Today is no exception. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce Chuck Hoover. But before we do that, I want to set up the show and give some thanks. First of all, give some thanks to Huntington Bank for their support of us for so long in every experiment that we tend to have in terms of all things media and marketing. And pay attention to the PPP. The specs will be coming out soon, and look to Huntington Bank as your partner if you need that kind of support. So also 40 by 80, that's the longitude and latitude of Pittsburgh, but more importantly, it's the wholly owned subsidiary of the Pittsburgh Tech Council and all things focused on entrepreneurship and workforce development. So you can see that we have muted your microphones. We've done that on purpose, but you can see mine is not muted. Mine is not muted because for some reason today, I think they know that Chuck Hoover is on and they're pretty excited. So I will mute when Chuck is talking, but let's just set the stage here. We've muted your microphones, obviously not mine, but we also have an opportunity for chat, and there's going to be plenty of an opportunity to ask Chuck some questions. So on that note, I am very thrilled to introduce Chuck Hoover. If you don't know him, he's general manager of Facebook Reality Labs here in Pittsburgh. He's a good friend to the tech community. He's an amazing ambassador for all things Pittsburgh, and he is doing some really incredible work in terms of reality, okay? And that's virtual reality. We're going to talk about that, and hopefully augmentative reality as well. So I am welcoming Chuck, and we're going to just introduce him. He's going to talk about himself. So Chuck, you are not a native Pittsburgher, but you've been here long enough, and you've really embraced a lot of the amazing characteristics of Pittsburgh, and you're really able to articulate why this is such an important place. But first, let's say, hey, Chuck, who are you? Welcome. Thanks for taking the time. And let's talk a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about your professional career.
Sure, and thanks for the great intro, Audrey, and thanks again for running these conversations so frequently. This is a really awesome group to have. So my name's Chuck Hoover. Right now I'm the general manager of Facebook Reality Labs Pittsburgh. A bit about my background, and happy to go more into this if any of it's of interest, but I actually started my career outside of technology, actually in architecture. So I went to Virginia Tech, studied architecture and design for grad school there, started in that industry, but realized pretty quickly that what I really wanted to do was take on more cutting edge technology, right? Like the world of architecture was amazing. It was really fulfilling, but it wasn't pushing boundaries. It wasn't exploring new technology, new ways of moving forward, new ways of thinking in the way that I really wanted. So I ended up going back to school, and that was kind of the second time I came back to Pittsburgh. I came back to go to grad school at CMU, worked with Randy Pausch and the folks there at the Entertainment Technology Center back in the day. Wow. And ended up getting really excited about the game industry at the time. So after my time at CMU, I headed out to the West Coast to move to Palo Alto, and I worked at Electronic Arts in the games industry. If anybody's played the Sims games or a game called Dead Space back a few years ago, those were some of the projects that I worked on while I was in the Bay Area. And then, I liked my time at Electronic Arts, but it was a large company, and I kind of missed the East Coast a little bit. So I ended up chatting more and more with one of the professors that I worked with pretty closely at CMU named Jesse Schell, who had recently started up a game studio in Pittsburgh called Schell Games, which many of you on the call may be familiar with. And I ended up coming back east, moved back to Pittsburgh, and joined Schell Games as a producer there, and spent about 12 years at the company, becoming the chief production officer, and really focusing as a company on all sorts of interactive projects, from games to theme park attractions for Walt Disney World and Universal Studios, and eventually augmented and virtual reality projects. And certainly proud of the time I got to spend at Schell Games. It's an amazing team and group there. They're one of the largest independent game studios in the world right now. And they really, we got to become leaders in the AR and VR space. And over time, that became more and more of a passion of mine. So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I ended up moving over to Facebook to help support the research team here. And that's a bit about me.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about the research team there, and let's talk about Facebook, the labs, as much as you can talk about, because
Yeah.
there's some work that you can't talk about. But what can you talk about?
Right. So I guess high level public information about us and our presence here in Pittsburgh. So most people, when you think of Facebook, right, you think of Facebook, the website, right? Everybody knows Facebook, massive audience worldwide. Facebook also owns Instagram and WhatsApp and some other organizations and applications out there. Those are kind of the core suite of Facebook's social network focus. But, Facebook has a lot of forward-focused research work, both in artificial intelligence and in virtual and augmented reality. So our team here in the lab I work with in Pittsburgh is a group working on the future of what AR and VR can develop to be. We also have an AI group here in Pittsburgh as well. So we actually have a couple different Facebook offices in Pittsburgh that have grown over the last few years, which is pretty exciting to see that our presence continue to grow. But the lab's mission here is pretty unique. We're entirely focused on virtual telepresence, which, if you kind of unpack what that means a little bit, our whole mission is for all of us. A good example would be all of us on this call right now. At some point in the future, can we have this conversation where we feel like we're in the same space together? And really the key differentiator from, we could do that now, right? Like we could put on virtual reality headsets. You could say, well, maybe it feels like that now. I can see a bunch of video screens and you guys can see me, but it doesn't feel like we're present together, right? There's a very big difference that we've all felt over these last 10 months of not being present with people. So our mission is to be able to be present with folks across any distance, indistinguishable from real life. And that's really the key of our work and why it's such long-term research, is we want it to be able to feel like we're all in the same room together in such a high level of fidelity that there would be no difference from actually being in the room together. Obviously, aside from being able to have a handshake, which we can't do now anyway. So maybe that's not as much of a big deal anymore. But that's the work we're doing here in Pittsburgh. We have a pretty sizable team and we've been growing over the last few years. And we've done, a lot of work to bringing that goal closer to being a reality.
So, at the beginning of the pandemic, I wrote you and I said, oh my gosh, how far away are you from this? Right? And I said, this would have been the perfect time to be in that world, right? And to really leverage that. So how far away are we? What do you think in terms of, the sense of time?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Audrey. I mean, we kind of joke internally a lot that, maybe we'll be ready for next pandemic since we missed this one. But because, like what we're working on is exactly what you want in situations like this. But I think it's also incredibly valuable for, when we get back to normal life, right? This is technology, if it pans out, that if you're able to be present with other people, truly present with them across any distance, does that change business meetings? Does that change flights, right? Do I know, like, obviously, of course, I still want to travel. I still want to go to France because I want to eat, right? I still want to go to the beach because I want to swim in the ocean. But what about all those trips that you don't want to take for the location? You want to take that trip for the interactions, for the people, for the humans. And, can we reduce air traffic? Can we reduce commutes? Can we reduce business trips that are only exist so you can get that extra face-to-face connection? There's so much signal and communication that's lost when we have even a Skype video, right? Those little things, like the fidelity that's lost in the direction of someone's eyes while they're shrunk to 240 by 480 pixels on a Zoom screen, right? When I glance off the screen, you don't have shared context of where I am. Did I just glance at the clock or did someone walk in the room? All that signal you miss over video conference right now. And that's the sort of stuff where if we can really be present as virtual avatars, we can gain back and maybe change travel habits. But I think, there's certainly the travel we do now that could be reduced. And that has large impacts on the environment and the way we work. But there's also the connections that we don't have now that we can start building,
Right.
right? Like we all know that no matter how close a relationship is with someone, whether it's a friend or a family member, when they leave, when they move to another city or move to another country, or you don't work in the same office anymore, that relationship degrades over time, right? And the stronger it was at the beginning, maybe the longer it takes to degrade. But the less you see people, the less close you are with them. But what if we can give you opportunities to have that close connection, to be able to play poker with your friends from college in that same room together, to be able to see family or loved ones in places where maybe you can't travel to, or it'd be prohibitively expensive to travel, right? If we can lower the cost to build human connections and get high fidelity connections, right? Like you can connect to anyone in the world right now over texting or WhatsApp, but that's not real human communication. That's not using all of the sensors that we've evolved to be able to use to understand communication with another person. That's all predicated being in the same space with them. And that's really why we're trying to replicate that.
Yeah, let's jump to, we have a whole bunch of questions here, and I'd like to jump to some of them, and Jonathan's going to monitor them and convey them. So I don't know if you want to start with Julia's question, Jonathan, and just work your way
it's
down.
always good to have Julia on the call. And then hopefully after these questions, I have a question for you as well, Chuck, that I was super impressed about when we toured your space just before the pandemic hit. So let's start with Julia here. She wants to know how has COVID-19 and working from home impacted the opportunities for AR and VR?
Oh, yeah, great question. So, yeah, I think we were all, this has all been a pretty big shock to the system as we all move to work from home all across the world, really. I think there's been a lot of opportunities and use cases with AR and VR. Sadly, I don't think the technology's been there for it to have a massive amount of utility right now. There are a number of VR communication systems and services right now where we can put on headsets and be avatars in spaces with each other, right? Like I have some loaded up on my Quest here right now, and I occasionally will have meetings with people at work or even friends. I've done events with friends or other colleagues or other kind of communities of practice like this, where we've had VR engagements and conversations together. And right now they're impressive, they're interesting, you get some benefit from it, but it still feels a little bit like a novelty. So I think, what's missing in my mind, and what's, this very much relates to the work we're trying to do here in Pittsburgh, is that it's not actual representations of ourselves, right? The avatars that represent you in virtual reality right now, you're picking from a character creator. It doesn't emote, it doesn't express, it's a floating cartoon head. Maybe you have little circles representing your hands, but really all you're getting is a worse voice chat without video, but you gain some presence, right? So I think, those systems have been interesting right now during the pandemic. I think the biggest benefit in my mind is it's made really clear to everyone what the use case is for the technology we're trying to develop. Whereas before the pandemic, we'd talk about it with folks, and sometimes you'd have people mention, well, like, why wouldn't I just Skype? What's wrong with video conference? And I don't know, I feel like we all kind of get it now where the benefit would be.
So Jonathan, keep going, because there's some great questions in
So
here.
Bill Frace wants to know, how close are we to the Ready Player One immersive VR Oasis platform with haptics and all the other fun stuff that goes with it?
Oh yeah, great question, Bill. I think that's what half the people working on this stuff are hoping to build, either Ready Player One or Snow Crash, which I actually think is a better book around this kind of tech, which is a good read. Yeah, it's really hard to predict. I think what makes me hesitant to put a timeline on it, right? Like there was the cheaper VR system wave in the early 90s, where VR systems made it down to about $200,000 a piece. And I don't know, for anybody who remembers, there started to be kiosks in the mall for location-based VR. Disney actually built Disney virtual reality theme parks, 2 of them, all based on virtual reality attractions. And I think then if you asked someone that exact same question, they'd probably answer, oh, we're probably within like 10 to 15 years of something like that. And here we are 25 years past that. And yeah, we're not, we're a little bit closer, but not that much. It actually took a while to get technology to the point where it's now feasible at a consumer level, right? The Quest 2 here, which I don't know, I'm a little biased because we make these, but this is, in my opinion, by far the best at-home VR system. It's $299, which is relatively cheap compared to anything that's come before it. High fidelity, lightweight, doesn't need to tether to a computer, so it has all its onboard compute. So it's way simpler to use. And even that doesn't have us at the spot where it feels like you're replacing real life. So I think we have a long way to go to replace all the sensory input that's going to make it feel so immersive that you kind of get lost in these realities. But we're inching closer and closer. There's work on haptics, there's work on visuals, there's work on audio, and really that's what we need to replicate. But I do think when we hit that, we're going to hit some tipping point, and then it's going to be fast, right? I don't think this is something that's going to drag on for 30 years. I think, we have a while till technology in all those areas hits some bar of utility or quality. And once we pass that, the use cases are going to explode when we can get to that level of fidelity. So I know that's not a specific answer, but it's not going to be soon, but we're working on it because we think there's a path to get there.
Do you think that 5G will help this, like accelerate this at all?
Yeah, a lot of what becomes difficult with virtual and augmented reality platforms is simply the physics of compute and data that you need to process on these devices, right? Our goal is not to have virtual reality headsets like this. Our goal is to have virtual reality headsets like this, right? That are like the glasses that half of us on this call are wearing, that are lightweight, everyday wearable, socially acceptable, that are things we can use every day. And in order to do that, we need to be able to shrink down compute and processing to incredibly small levels, or offload compute to the cloud. And being able to do that requires massive amounts of bandwidth. So 5G and hopefully 6G will be technologies that I think will be critical to be able to offload a bunch of compute to be able to get these systems smaller and smaller so that they can be with us all the time. Which, just like with smartphones, right? Like the utility of a smartphone isn't that it's a powerful computer, it's that it's a powerful computer that is always with you, right? That's the difference between that and a PC that's changed so much of the marketplace and businesses out there.
Okay, well, good, Jonathan, keep going.
Yeah, they keep rolling in. We need another hour here, Audrey, to get through all these.
Let's keep going.
Absolutely. So from Todd Seats wants to know, how do you get or incorporate the biological, physiological side of the equation into your research?
Oh, yeah. So I hope I'm answering the question correctly. Right now, our work actually requires us to, maybe the way to put it is, the approach that we're taking that's a little bit different here in Pittsburgh to create our virtual humans is, rather than try to simulate what we think humans are, right? And this is the typical approach, right? Like this is the approach you see in films, in games, in entertainment, where they're replicating virtual humans. You've all seen or read articles about movies where there's an actor who's passed away, or someone who needed to be augmented in a movie in some visual way. And we're using, hundreds of highly skilled artists and computers to do post-processing on these images to replicate life like humans. And we're doing things like simulating muscles and skin and movement. And these things can get us pretty far, but they require a lot of manual labor. A lot of it can't be done in real time. And the fact that we are trying to simulate a human still leads us into the uncanny valley, where characters still feel a little bit creepy. They're just a little bit off from feeling or moving in a real way. So the approach we're taking here in Pittsburgh, and I won't go too much into it because it would take an hour to talk through, but is really much less about simulating what we think humans are and simulating how we actually see ourselves. So we're using massive amounts of image data of ourselves, of real people, and we're able to process those images with machine learning and computer vision to be able to develop our avatars much more in a way of, like, I guess here's a good way to phrase it. You're not looking at me right now. You're looking at pixels on a screen captured from a camera. You're looking at light. It's digitized and packetized. This isn't me at all. But I don't fall into the uncanny valley. You wouldn't say I look like a 3D avatar in the latest, film where I've been created digitally, but this is me being created digitally. Why does this look fine, but digital creations and films don't quite get there yet? It's because what you're doing is optically mapping these digital images to what's actually happening, and which matches how your eyes work, right? Which matches how your sensors work. It's why the audio sounds reasonable too. And that's the approach we're taking, is really, can you use the same technology or the same theories that we're using with cameras and optics, but be able to scale that to represent me from any image, from any angle?
So we're going to go to some more questions, but I just want to, in candor, tell everyone that I've ordered a Quest 2, and I am not slated to receive it until February 3rd. So what's been the demand? Let's just talk about the business and the demand, and then Jonathan's going to go to the rest of the questions.
Sure, yeah. So I will note, I can't talk about this from a Facebook employee standpoint, mostly because I'm not in that group or that team. So I actually don't have a lot of insider data on the demand, but I can talk about it from someone who follows this, from a consumer level. The demand's been incredible. The Quest 2 has far exceeded our initial sales expectations. It's done really well in the marketplace. And I think, that really these systems it's going to be about fidelity of replication of sensors, and it's going to be about convenience, and it's going to be about utility. And I think for the first time, the Quest 2 in my mind has gotten past the convenience barrier that previous systems struggled with, right? Like even the cutting edge VR systems a year or 2 years ago required me to be tethered to my full PC, which meant I need to have a pretty high-end PC, which we don't all have. It meant I needed to put lighthouse sensors to be able to have 3D tracking, which means I have more cables on my desk. I have little, stationary IR lights blasting out from my desk or screwed into the wall. My headset had to have giant cables hanging out of it. It was heavy. It was hot. So I think, this is one of those instances where really it's kind of form factor, comfort level, and convenience that has kind of brought this, I think, such a high level of success. And I think, that was a smart move on the product team, or any product teams developing kind of onboard compute headsets like this. Is, that's a bigger barrier right now than quality. And now we need to chase down both of those.
I know, and there's no cutting in line, folks. You just have to go in and order.
Yep. I couldn't even get mine fast. I had to order it off the website like everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's continue to go through some of the questions.
Yeah, Audrey, we should jump down a little bit because I think this might be interesting to switch gears in the name of time here. So Peter Argentine wants to know, basically, can we talk a little bit more about what's going on with augmented reality? We talked a lot about virtual reality.
Yeah. So just to clarify, really the main difference in augmented versus virtual reality is how much of the real world are you letting in? Virtual reality is totally blocking all the light and sensor input from the outside world. I can't see the outside world when I have this in unless I go into pass-through mode. Augmented reality is simply letting in some amount of more reality. And I can actually be in augmented reality in this headset. I can hold my hand up to the right side and it'll let through a video feed of the actual room I'm in real time. So I guess the way I think about it is, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I think these things are really going to merge to the point where at some point it will be inevitable in the future that augmented virtual reality, like, stop thinking about it of headsets. It's just, how are we augmenting your reality digitally, right? And these could be through any technology. It's just like we've been talking about headsets for 30 years now, so everybody views AR and VR as headsets. Right. But when augmented reality gets to a point where it's ubiquitous and powerful, all sorts of crazy things happen, right? So when I can augment reality fully, why do I need my 30-inch computer monitor here? I can have a computer monitor in my office as large as I want, anywhere I want. I can do that in virtual reality now, but when I can do that in augmented reality, it can be in my house. It doesn't have to be on the wall. It can be floating in the middle of the room. I can have 10 30-inch monitors. But then you can play that out more, like, well, if that's the monitor, why do I even need my PC? right? If I have really high bandwidth connection, my monitor can be anywhere and my PC can be in the cloud. It can be anywhere. So then I don't need a PC. And then you start thinking about, well, okay, then I don't need a television, and okay, then my wife's augmented reality glasses and mine and my kids, they all sync together so we can still all watch the same program at the same time. But that television could be shared between us in the living room so we can have a shared sense of space, or I can be in one room and they can be in another room and we can all see it together. And then you play that out more. Okay, well, I don't need televisions. I don't need PC screens. Do I even need signage when I'm driving down the highway? Do we need signs anymore? Every sign, every billboard, every highway sign, those can all be augmented in the world. We don't have to build that stuff. We don't have to look at that stuff if we don't want to. That stuff can change and be relevant for us. What if the highway signs are just the highway signs for the exits I care about or the path I'm taking, right? And then, you take it even further. What if I'm working from home in, a old Pittsburgh basement and that happens to be where my office is set up? Well, I could make that look like my actual office, or I could make that look like a village in Tibet or the beach, right? Do we even need to paint walls anymore? Right? Do I need these ugly curtains anymore? Like all that stuff, you can augment. It doesn't just have to be, digital name tags. I think everybody thinks of it first. It's really, at some point, this feels like it's going to be inevitable that you can change all of that with reality.
So I'm so bullish on this, right? I mean, I'm excited and I'm bullish, and I think about some of the things you and I have talked about offline, which include, people there's, an orthopedic in San Francisco that's doing training on surgery. There are people who are working with people who have autism and are helping them there. Can you give us some of what you think are some of the imminent use cases that you think we should be excited about?
Yeah, those are good, Audrey, because I think a lot of those are already happening and are a place where people can jump on in this world right now. There's a lot of folks on here and businesses where this stuff won't be applicable until it turns that corner. And that's okay. I think it's good to learn about this stuff and stay on top of it so you can think about how you can capitalize on it or leverage it when it is ready for you. But there, a lot of the technology is at a state where it's very usable and impactful right now. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of work with probably the most advanced AR system right now is Microsoft HoloLens 2, which is pretty incredible in terms of a world-locked augmented reality headset. And this is used extensively in the medical field right now for surgical training. And it's a pretty great system. But it's not priced at a consumer level. I think it's still around $3,000. It's not something you would wear out and about. You would look kind of ridiculous. But it's perfect for training. It's perfect for instances where training would either be expensive, time consuming, or dangerous. So a lot of this is used in mine safety. It's used in medicine. And then, like you mentioned, Audrey, there's applications for mental health areas as well. There's a VR application that came out last year to help autistic kids with getting better at public speaking. And it was a simple VR application, but basically it simulated a auditorium and an audience. And the audience would fade away if the speaker wasn't making eye contact with people in the audience. And it gave you an opportunity to train public speaking by actually understanding like what it feels like to stand in front of an audience of people. And it, obviously it feels a little different than real life, but it kind of was able to reinforce the positive structures of public speaking and making eye contact and looking around the audience at different points. And they've been running trials with this and seeing pretty good results so far. So I think, these are lots of areas where very specific use cases rather than broad consumer work is viable right now with the tech we have right now.
So for your advice for the business community is to pay attention, right? What's your advice for the B2B side of this? What is your advice for us? Invest in this, pay attention to this, immerse yourself. What's your guidance from a strategy standpoint?
Yeah, I think it really depends on each individual and their company and their teams and what they're trying to do. I think there are definitely folks underinvested in this area right now who could capitalize on this immediately. And then there's folks who just are going to be blindsided when this when this becomes real, when augmented reality replaces smartphones, when virtual reality replaces PCs, when all of our realities can be impacted in ways we're not even thinking of right now. And like you think back to the last two computer revolutions, right? The companies that were left behind because they were slow to adopt PCs and networked machines, right? And how, you know, as an example, how dominant a company like Walmart became because they were able to capitalize on low cost PCs, scanning, logistics, and item tracking. And then you can think of the kind of next computer revolutions around the internet and mobile devices, and how that same company failed to capitalize, in my opinion anyway, on online consumer shopping. And, you know, they had the technology to be able to pivot to that really quickly, but they were a little slow in the switch to the fact that everybody was going to be online, that we were going to have mobile devices and PCs all in our homes. And, you know, Amazon saw that area and was able to capitalize it, where arguably a company like Walmart should have been much better positioned. And it's tough for obviously established players. There's lots written about this, about how to stay on top of new technologies. But I think keeping yourself informed of where this tech is, it changes so fast, right? If you're interested in this, if you don't have a VR headset, again, like go get one. I don't care if it's ours or somebody else's, but like invest in this stuff, use it, experience it, check it out again every 6 months. It's evolving so rapidly. At some point, we're going to hit a threshold where, you know, no matter what you do on this call, it's going to be useful or valuable for you, whether that's now or 10 years from now. But it'll probably sneak up on us.
So we're coming to an end. There's a couple of things. We've had a lot of questions, but first, are you hiring? Are you still hiring?
Absolutely. Yep. We are very much hiring. We have an active job board. But certainly I think you can apply generally for Pittsburgh, even if you don't see a role on there as well.
Okay. And then the other thing is, if people have questions, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to chat.
Okay. And then what is your favorite? What is your go-to in terms of the app on?
Oh, experiences in virtual reality. Yeah. There's two that I play often right now. And so certainly I'll give a plug to, I think, some of our local VR experiences that are incredible. Shell Games makes two that are out on the Quest and other platforms. One's called I Expect You to Die. The other one is called Until You Fall. I'm not just plugging them because I used to work at Shell Games or that they're in Pittsburgh. They're some of the top VR apps on our app store.
Wow.
They're really good. So check those out. My go-to repeat play right now is absolutely a game called Beat Saber. It's a lot of fun. It's a rhythm game. It's one of the most popular VR titles out there. The design of the experience fits what VR is good at perfectly, and you get really good exercise. There's a lot of people who their entire workout regimen right now is simply Beat Saber. And then there's another cool one I found the other week, which I don't know if a lot of people have played. It's called A Fisherman's Tale, which is a really cool short narrative experience in VR. That does a lot with feeling immersed in a space that's pretty clever. It's a good little puzzle game.
Listen, Chuck, we can never spend enough time with you. You are an amazing citizen of the tech community and a great champion for Pittsburgh, in addition to the incredible work that you're doing and leading at Facebook. I can't thank you enough for just spending a little time with us and being so accessible. And I noticed that you've let your hair grow, and you, like many other men, have grown a beard. So I did have to do a double take to say, is that Chuck Hoover? But we know it's you. And we are big fans of yours and the work that Facebook Reality Labs is doing here in the community. So if you want to reach out to him, you know where to find him. We actually put a QR code on our screen so you can find him. He's great and passionate, and we're going to work hard to make sure that this is an epicenter for lots of things VR and AR. So can't thank you enough for taking the time with us. Tomorrow we have Jeanette Solomon, and she's going to be talking about the Steel City Arts Initiative. So we're happy to have her. It's the intersection of many things. It's based on the north side of Pittsburgh. So we're excited to hear about the work that's going on there. Chuck, you might be interested in that work as well. So really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone. Get a Quest 2. There's no shortcutting it. There is a waiting list for it, but I highly recommend it. And just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Facebook Reality Labs. Thank you, Chuck Hoover. See everyone tomorrow. Thanks again.
Thanks, Audrey. This was fun.
You
Bye,
guys.
everybody.